Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your being here. Just a statement before I talk about debates. I think that our country is right now in the most dangerous position it's ever been in from an economic standpoint, from a safety standpoint. Both gangs on the street and, frankly, gangs outside of our country in the form of other countries that are, frankly, very powerful. They're very powerful countries, and we don't know what we're doing. We have leadership that has no clue how to handle them or how to handle any other situation. We have a lot of bad things coming up. You could end up in a depression of the 1929 variety, which would be a devastating thing. Took many years, took decades to recover from it. And we're very close to that, and we're very close to a world war. In my opinion, we're very close to a world war. We have people that don't know how to handle it. They're not respected. All over the world, they're laughed at. And we can't have that. Most dangerous period of time I've ever seen for our country.
Is this post that you put up about Barack Obama. And it went viral, right? It's got nearly 50,000 likes, 15,000 retweets, and 2.5 million views. There's a photo of you and Barack Obama, and you say that I've known Obama since '95. We come out of Chicago together. He knows how it works. He's behind the campaign to dump 15 million Dem primary votes and replace Biden. This was his choice. Classic Chicago Democrat machine politics, selection over election, the bosses over the people. You know, we've been saying that Kamala Harris is illegitimately installed and that this is one of the most anti-democratic things that have ever happened in the history of American politics. And pretty much a major black eye in the party of protecting democracy. It's quite an ironic turn. I wanted to give you just a chance to unpack this because there's been very much this cloak and dagger campaign against Biden, and you're saying that Obama ran it. Wow, what a backstab.
Well, yes, they ought to call today's Democratic Party the undemocratic party because how they dumped Biden was right out of the back room. Classic old-time Chicago backroom politics. In the old days, the political bosses didn't look like Nancy Pelosi or Barack Obama. They were cigar chomping guys with pinky rings, but they called the shots in the shadows of the back room in the old days. And then you had the advent of television, and then now social media and all these other things. And the thought that now today this party would do the same thing in full view, out in the open, in broad daylight, to essentially pull their incumbent president out of the race after they hoodwinked 15 million Democratic primary voters who voted for him, knowing full well that his cognitive issues were there then, just like they are now. And the only reason they did it was because they looked at the polling after that, the disastrous debate he had with President Trump. And so for political expediency, not for doing what's right for the people, they decided to get together in the back room and do what they did and how they did it and get Biden thrown off the ticket. Now what's going to happen, Benny, is they have a candidate who the more you see her, the more you don't like her. The more you see her, the more you realize she's just not up to the job. The more you see her, the more you realize she's a mile wide and about an inch thick. There's no substance to her. And she's malleable and moldable. And they're just going to hide her, is what they're going to do. And this is so dishonest in a democracy when you actually hide a candidate. They did it in 2020 with Biden. They got away with it. You watch. They're going to do that with her as well because they're going to keep her really scripted, really tight, and away from any kind of interaction with everyday people. And I think the contrast between that style and Trump's, what many people think is sort of an undisciplined style, I think that contrast is going to be really profound because one thing you'll say about Trump's style, whether you think it's undisciplined or not, I think it's refreshing because I think it's authentic and I think it's honest. And I think it's why a lot of Democrats, working people who don't want to say it, they're afraid to say it, are supporting Trump and have supported Trump. They appreciate the honesty of the things he says. They're tired of scripted, fake politicians who give 2-minute speeches written by David Axelrod like I did at 4:30 in the morning in Chicago back in 1996. And by the way, Axelrod used to write lines for me and Obama. And when Obama ran for president years later, because he worked for both of us, I would recognize some of these lines and I'd say, hey, wait a minute, I said that 4 years ago. Axelrod wrote me that line 4 years ago. Obama was using it in 2008.
So this entire Kamala moment is completely manufactured by Obama, and this decision was made by Barack Obama.
Duh.
Do you have any insights, since you know the entire team, do you have any insights as to how they eventually manipulated Biden into stepping down?
Oh, yes, I do. They
It's like those stories you hear from the original Bolshevik communists. You know, they started out with like 20, 24 core leaders, like Karl Marx, Engels, and there were another like 20, 22 of them. And by the time it was all said and done, they were all dead. They all killed each other. Like I am telling you, this communist mentality is completely cutthroat, and that's what separates it from every other kind of political system in existence.
Use the stick and the carrot, more stick than carrot. And behind the scenes, using third parties, dispatching them to Biden and to his wife, probably to his son, and maybe his brother, people close to him, top aides. They threatened him. I mean, they've known Biden for as long as they have. Obama knows him better than anybody else in politics because in order to be his running mate, the Obama team had to vet him. So they've done all kinds of opposition research on Biden. Biden has not just a few skeletons in the closet because he's been there for so long, since 1973. He's got skeletons, many skeletons in many closets. They know it, and they went to him, and they told him stuff. And they basically said, if you don't get out, we're going to drop dimes on you. We're going to leak this to the media that we've now been able to persuade that they think that you're no longer qualified to be president. 2 weeks before you were, but now you're not. We control them, and they work for us. And so they pressured him. And they probably said, look, but if you get out, here's certain things we'll do to make your landing soft. And so they probably offered him some carrot as well. This is how it's worked. This is how they do it. And you know what this reminds me a little bit? Obama in 2024 reminds me a little bit of Lyndon Johnson in 1960.
Or gangsters.
When the Chicago
Al Capone
convention was also held, when the Democratic convention was also held in Chicago. Johnson orchestrated Hubert Humphrey's nomination and did it from the back room. And the way Obama is operating is, and Pelosi.
Hey folks, Bruce McDonald here, Telemanca Review. You get the point. There's like another 11 minutes of that clip, but I'm not going to play the whole thing because... So, I mean, it's all coming out now. I mean, this is basically they did to Biden what they did to Bernie in 2016. So the Democratic Party is in chaos now, but they can't fold. Okay? Hey, Lulu. Come on, baby. I'm podcasting. Yeah, girl. They can't really lose. The stakes are too high now. They have to win at any cost, and this is the situation we're in. It's like unbelievable the level of tension at every level of society now. You guys feeling anything like yesterday and today? Today's 8/8, which I think is like the darkest day of the satanic calendar. 8/8. 8th month, 8th day. 8/8 is just a son of a bitch of a day. And to add to it, I think we're in like a Mercury retrograde until the 28th of August or the 24th of August. If you buy into that astrology stuff, I think they're generally right, but you know. So yeah, man, we're in a real pickle here. You know, but it's kind of exciting, right? It's like, you know, I don't know the Lion's Gate. I don't know Santo. I don't get that deep into astrology. The only reason I'm bringing it up is that I first felt it. And then once I feel it, I look for an external identifier, like what's going on, you know. And I just happened to notice that it was 8/8 today. And everybody around me is sort of gripped by... I don't know, like a quiet blanket of negativity, I'd say. Not real bad, but it just is what it is, right? If you fall into water, you're going to get wet. You're going to get a little darkened on 8/8. It's just the way it is. There's got to be like, holy cow, millions of these whack jobs out doing crazy shit now, rituals. And really magic is, I think, really what's doing everything in now. There's a threshold for how much magic can be going on the planet. And then you start to get into total chaos when you get into cascading and ricocheting magics. Right? You could almost get so intense that it could produce Mandela effects. You know? Remember the definition of magic from yesterday, from the rabbis and the professors themselves. Again, and it's against God's law. But it's all magical now, like this, and this is the true story of Sodom and Gomorrah too. It wasn't just everybody thinks that's just a lesson on sexual deviance, but no, I mean those societies had just completely descended into pagan magic. Okay, so it's interesting the place that magic takes in the world, because it's a fairly powerful operative force in the world, in the groups that are employing it, and no doubt about it. Okay, and once you know it, once you can see it, you just see it. And these skills are built up over time. They're built up over time spent in the cultivation of consciousness. How do you get good at anything? How do you become a good hunter? How do you learn to track animals? Right? And I don't mean after you've shot them and there's a blood trail, but how do you just go out into the woods and track animals and stuff like that? Well, over time, you build up a sense and a kind of memory bank of what you're looking for, right? And it's the same thing with the magical stuff. You just once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's just one of those things. Once you step over the line, there's no coming back. You live in a world in which magic is an influential force, and you see it all the time. I see it all the time. It's as real as weather to me now. And when I speak about society and politics, I generally center on the groups that are performing the most precise and consistent and usually the darkest forms of magic, because the dark magic and the blood magic seems to be dominating. And technology has crossed streams with it as well, as I keep repeating over and over again, which are basically the themes from the book up there now, The Devil in Us, A Memoir of You and Me. If you haven't read it yet, pick up a copy. If you can't afford it, send me an email, seenthattinker@protonmail.com or gmail.com or yahoo.com. Just seenthattinker, same thing, minus the number 1 there. Same thing as my Skype handle, seenthattinker @yahoo, @gmail, @protonmail. I have them all, pretty much. I'll send you a PDF of the book. I find it a very fascinating and really quite exciting time to be alive. I view adversity in situations like this the way astute market investors look upon chaos. So the billionaires out there, they're looking at what's going on now, a certain class of them, maybe not all of them. I think some of them are even leaving now, buying little islands, the writings on the wall. I'm hearing these stories all the time now. I watched a very haunting interview with Michael Yon from Osaka. He's in Osaka now. He's the Green Beret that's been documenting the decimation and genocide of Western culture. Yon is spelt Y-O-N. I highly recommend you give him a watch. Highly recommend. Oh, thanks, Tim Tech. Hi, Karen. Kit Walters Music. Hey. So this is the way it's going, and the excitement I get is similar to the investor, because I know that crisis and opportunity are the same thing, and God's only currency is opportunity. So the opportunity I'm looking for here is further consolidation of my relationship with the divine, looking to be of service in any way I can in this very difficult time, help people get through it. Talk to people like I do on my podcast, and I hope it's comforting to hear my words. I can't imagine it would not be comforting if you've come to 50, 60, 70% of the realizations I've come to, and to have it all tied up and a ribbon around it, tied up like a bow. It's very, very, very positive thing overall, I think. So as I said, if you go, what happens is the circumstance comes in and it spikes you. Okay, so you get an energy spike. It's like an adrenaline release, or a kind of torque power is created by the drama of the circumstances. A kind of torque power between the negative and the positive in your solar plexus and in your mind. And you can harvest that energy, and you can use it to propel yourself spiritually. And if the downside is if you don't harness the energy, if you don't ride it like a bull, if you don't ride it like a wave, if you don't ride it like a horse or ride it like a motorcycle, you're going to crash. And the crash is going to be whatever it's going to be. You might get up and dust yourself off, or you might break an arm, metaphorically. So we're being spiked now. And the energy is always positive. But the external circumstance is so daunting that a lot of people will take the spike and put it into negative thinking and worry, which will counter-create a beneficial outcome. See, it's not... The principle of faith is really, as I see it, the principle of not thinking and just trusting. And just realizing that whatever is going to happen is going to happen. The day you're born and the day you die are written before you come into this world. Everybody has in their timeline has a death day. It's predetermined. Okay, so there's nothing really that can happen. I mean, I don't often go... It's very hard to mix the spiritual and the socio-political streams in a podcast, because they're both like two different stadiums. One's like a football stadium and one's a soccer stadium, although they call soccer football over here, but you know what I mean. They're the same but different. Different energy, different feel. So, how do I mix these two things? Well, we are reminded of the fact that we live in a spiritual reality, a generated reality, not a matrix. That sounds too machine-like. But we live in a co-created spiritual reality in which the substance and energies that we use to think, visualize, and exacerbate or stimulate our feeling through this internal life are part of the creative process of what ends up being our timeline and the circumstance of our lives. This is the true definition of manifestation, as I've said numerous times on the Talamanca Review. And it's going on all the time, not just when you light a candle and focus intent on something. That's just ridiculous. Right? It's like saying, put your hand in the water. Okay, you put your hand in the sink. Now dry your hand off. Now put your hand back in the sink, but this time feel the water. What does that mean? You just had your hand in the water. And what's the difference between, intentful manifestation and the non-stop process of manifestation through consciousness? And this is why mental discipline, control of thoughts and feelings is so important. Sorry, ladies. Why might I say that? Sorry, ladies. Because women generally are ruled more by feeling than thought. And there's times where that's beneficial and there's times when it's not. This is one where it's probably not. It's a very feminine energy. Have you noticed as well the sort of very, very defined gender division between the Democrats and the Republicans? The Democrats seem to represent a nearly purely feminine energy, and a dark feminine energy, I might say. I see shades of like Isis. Kali, the negative goddess in Hinduism. Isis being the negative goddess as well. I see shades of Isis and Kali and Medusa and Cleopatra, this kind of female energy. I see all of that in Kamala Harris. There's a lot of things in life that are not fair. Okay? They're just not fair. There's things about the genders that, depending on how you're looking at it, it can seem not fair. Okay? Because the male was created to procreate, and that biological mandate exists independent of any social structure to accommodate it, ergo marriage. Because we have been created to procreate indiscriminately. Okay? The fact that we do it in families is the product of civilization, cultivation, and these things, and it's a very good thing. But at a biological level, the male is supposed to be going out there and literally fucking everything that moves. I'm not trying to be graphic. I'm not trying to be foul or disgusting or anything, but it's quite literally true. Whereas the female, not so much. The interesting thing about the female sexuality is that it can be turned into a survival tool for the female, and it can be turned into an advancement tool for the female. Okay, so this is where I talk about the Cleopatra energy. She didn't rule like a man, she ruled like a woman, with all of the unique powers of a woman. And the dark powers of the feminine are as egregious as the dark powers of the male. Ask any of these Illuminati fucknuts, they'll tell you the same thing. Corinne Hustebot told me that based on her years of working with survivors of the cult and reformed torturers and stuff like that, she's come away with the uniform understanding that the women are infinitely more cruel than the men. That if you had to go through a ritual torture session where they weren't going to kill you, you would be praying your torturers were male and not female. That's what Corinne told me. Okay? So let's get over this whole gender thing. Okay? You want to know what it really is? What the real issue is? It's power. How do you handle power? Power changes you. Money changes you. Money is power. It's a form of power. It's a distilled power. Why is money so powerful? Because it can manifest almost anything. Manifest the death of somebody, manifest the passage of a critical piece of legislation that aids your corporation. Manifest almost anything you want except God. God cannot be called in by money. In fact, would be insulted by the offer. But just about anything else can be manifested with money. So, we're talking about power. And Kamala Harris is on an absolutely drunken power trip now as she campaigns for president. She's different. She's getting a lot of coaching. And I just find it amazing that they're going to go full Monty on the woke shit. You know? Black people have caught on to what a fraud she is. Even the Indians are in on it now. On X. Fucking... You know? There's this guy I watched today, just like a 45-second video, a comedy video. And he was talking about how India is known for scamming. Right? They have a lot of international call centers. They scam people out of bank money and stuff like that. It's the scamming culture. Most cultures are, by the way. That is another way that we were quite unique in the West, is we didn't scam people so much. But there's a lot of countries out there that, you know, do you know that they have entire warehouses of people at computers in the Philippines? And all they're doing is laying out kiddie porn and then digitally following anybody who comes in to access it, and then following them out with what they took, and then sending them a package by email and saying, we know what you did, not telling them that we're actually running the child porn site out of the Philippines, and we need $10,000 sent to this bank account immediately, and we promise you the information will be destroyed. There are multi-million-dollar operations like that in the Philippines. Okay? So rather than being shocked by the horror of pedophilia and contributing to putting it out there, this is the genius of the human race, right? We can fucking take anything and try and turn it into a profit. You know, so the Filipinos are looking at this and they're going, hey, these Western Europeans and North Americans seem quite susceptible to kiddie porn, quite a number of them. How could we make a business out of that? Can you fucking, like, who even thinks that way? You know, I guess sometimes I think I'm a little bit naive. Even with everything I've been through, you know, for those of you who've read The Devil in Us, I still think sometimes I'm naive, or maybe I've just preserved an unusual portion of that childhood innocence, except ye be as little children kind of energy that they talk about in the Bible. Because I can't imagine thinking that way. And it's not that I'm beyond scamming. I mean, between me and you, the 300 people who might hear this, between YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify, and Spreaker, and Google Podcasts, and everything, between the 300 or 400 people who listen to me now, those are my numbers on a daily basis. Not that much, but I'm holding the attention of a school auditorium every day. Oh, for fuck's sake. Yeah. There's always people over here now. There's a fucking car up here now, and somebody calling my wife. 8888. Everything will grind you just a little bit more today. It's the darkest day of the calendar year, 88. Everything will grind you a little bit more today. So Cami is this, you know, this Cleopatra, Isis, Kali, Medusa energy. That's what she is. And don't underestimate her. Whores make good witches. Sex magic, and sex is a form of magic. Okay? Even incidentally. You know, remember, I've known all these, I grew up with these people. Spent a decade of my life living at a street level from 16 to 26 in rooming houses and welfare hotels. Living with whores, recently paroled people, or just shuffling out of a halfway house. And lowest of the low. I knew these people, hung out with them, was friends with them. You know, when people live at the same level, they don't judge each other. You know, I'm living in a fucking welfare hotel in Vancouver in 1992. And, you know, the woman across the street from me is a prostitute. She comes in every night at like 2 o'clock in the morning after she's made her money. And if I used to still be up. It's 1992 in Vancouver. I had just graduated. It was just before I went to Taiwan. I was living in Vancouver. Have a cigarette with her, talk to her for 30, 40 minutes after she finishes fucking and sucking for a 4 or 5 hour shift. You get to know they're just human beings. But what I noticed about all the whores, whores become incredibly psychically perceptive. And it's from dealing with that astral sex energy all the time. So don't underestimate Cami. Don't underestimate her. Okay? Plus, she's going to get top tier people around her. So now we know the truth. It's all coming out. I told you, this is all Obama. You know, there's something I heard on a Tucker Carlson podcast a couple weeks ago, and this never sunk into my head before, but it was just simply that when somebody finishes 1 or 2 terms in Washington as a president, they leave Washington and never go back. Never in the history of the city of Washington has a president lived there after his presidency was finished. Barack Hussein Obama is the first. That Martha's Vineyard place is that's the weekend place, maybe, or the twice-a-month place. But really, he has a house in Washington, right around where they filmed the Exorcist there in Georgetown, Washington. Interesting that they did that movie in Washington, too. So this is all Obama, man. Cami's, and like I said, I mean, how many times do I have to say the same thing? I suppose I have new listeners every show, so he's a diehard communist, man. Don't kid yourself. That guy is a commie through and through. He's a communist. Justin Trudeau was a communist. And that's his political leaning. You know, there's a reason somebody says something out loud in 2015 like, I respect the basic dictatorship of China, because they can get things done quickly. Economically, he's right. If you want to build a highway or something, you get shit done a lot more quickly. A benign dictatorship would actually be a good form of government. like somebody who took absolute power, but only used it for the benefit of the whole, and the entity itself, the nation state, and its principalities, its spiritual guardians. If someone assumed corporeal power while incarnate over a nation in that manner, I don't think it would be negative karma. But malignant dictatorship, when you think about what Trudeau said in 2015 about China, and then flash forward to like 2022 and the trucker convoy, we'd all have the magic retarded non-axial in us. Concatenate that into an abbreviation, and you'll see the brilliance of my skirting. The auditory algorithms on the distribution channel. You can't even say their name because the system would stop and take a closer look, because they probably think you're talking about restrictions on the platform, highlighting to them that you may be saying something that is restrictive. Okay? Here's the Sean Ryan Show. We're just going to bop around on all these podcasts now. I'm just going to do a daily commentary. Let me see if I'm finished this section yet. So, where do I come in on all this? Do as much as you can, invest and commit yourself as much as you can to the welfare of that which you care about, your family, your community, your state, your province, your country, toward the highest ideals, the highest spiritual ideals that you think a nation should embody, and defend them as best you can. And then simultaneously remember that the whole thing is a game. Remember, it's a co-created dream we live in. Not a matrix, it's a co-created dream. And the point is to wake up to the fact that it is a dream. You're a dreamer dreaming in a dream. You want to know what enlightenment is? That's it. The psychic stuff and all the little magical powers that these New Age twits sell like trinkets and baubles in a Moroccan market. Just abuses of the siddhis, the mental powers, and the various stages of unfoldment of consciousness, but not spiritual. Spiritual is the constant understanding and the infusion of the commitment and detachment simultaneously. It's like living an oxymoron. It's like living a contradiction. Completely committed to this. I don't want to see Canada go under. I don't want to see the United States go under. But at the same time, it's all a game. And if you can contain those two contradictory things simultaneously, you're going to go through this whole thing really well. Don't pull too far back. Don't get too Buddhist about it. Don't get too Hindu about it. Oh, he's just karma, man. He's just the machinations of Kali. No, you can't get that detached about it, because when they say, when the Eastern paths call this reality an illusion, it's technically incorrect. If it were an illusion, it would have no aspects of the eternal, and the eternal energy is what sustains this place. So it's not an illusion. It's a constantly transforming, creating and diminishing, or creating and destroying, birthing and dying process is what's going on here. Okay, so it's a temporal experience. Okay, it's a temporal experience. You get a body, you go through a life, it's over. But it's sustained by the eternal energies, and the part of you that's experiencing the temporal is eternal. So it's not an illusion. The spirit of the one creator is running this world. It provides the energy. I don't want to say it's running things, because other forces come in and play roles and become actors and work out karmic cycles as human dictators or human saints or astral or causal demagogues or archangels or what have you. They're all roles. We're all playing in one multi-dimensional theater, and we're all sustained by one thing, and that's God. And the funny thing about God these days is the people who speak about it most in public don't seem to understand it that much at all. One could almost become an atheist if you were to listen to what's coming out of Israel and the American Jewish Israeli support team about God and their rights. It's so sickening. You almost, oh fuck, if that's true, I'm an atheist. But like I said, same thing with the Vatican. The Vatican is strangely silent about everything that's going on in the world right now. Very interesting how non-critical they are of Israel. Very interesting as well that Catholic Family Services is right there beside Jewish Family Services, taking $1 trillion out of the U.S. Treasury to move all these enemy insurgents to various strategic locations in the United States. So they're the same thing now. Same energy. The Vatican capitulated after World War II. Right, a lot more. I was considering writing about the Vatican in World War II and the devil in us, but I thought I took 2 steps back and I went, this is going to politicize the book too much. I want to just stay with my main thesis in my lens, in my literary lens, okay? Which is basically, this is the devil, this isn't the devil, this is what's running the world, it isn't the devil, this is what's been going on since 1880, and this is why we're in the situation we're in now. But there's a whole sub-story for Catholics that's quite fascinating, actually, about what happened in World War II, the Vatican relationship to the Nazis, which was very strong. And and the power that the Vatican lost when the Nazis and the Japanese lost. They lost a tremendous amount of power. They had to make concessions to these world powers, which after World War II, which were much more Kabbalistic than they had been before. Much more Kabbalistic. Okay. So I'm doing a lot of research on the Nephilim lately. Not so much, but I don't even know how to word things. My life is so weird and the way my life unfolds. Things are brought to me. I don't have to go looking for shit. Like, here I am in the middle of nowhere in the rainforest in an earthbag house, and everything I need is just sort of brought to me. I referenced this yesterday, but didn't finish my thought. I rewatched my podcast from yesterday, or parts of it anyways, and I talked about this, the Confessionals podcast that I watched, but as is my habit, my mind went somewhere else and I never came back and closed my thought. So the podcast is called The Confessionals, with an S, like plural, The Confessionals Podcast, or without the S, one or the other. Mainly does cryptids and stuff like that, but I've watched a couple of his shows just because they popped up in my YouTube feed. And there was one titled The Nephilim Appear as Clowns. And I listened to it. It was a 3-hour podcast. It's absolutely fascinating. And just another reminder that God is throwing all kinds of very brilliant and spiritually centered people into the world now. And they'll come in every form. You can't be religiously stoic. If they come as a Christian, but the spiritual information they're bringing is really good, then accept it. It doesn't mean you have to convert to Christianity and follow their faith or doctrine. But this is, by the way, this is my hope. I don't know if I've ever expressed this on the Talamanca Review before, but I would like to reach a point where people who pursue spiritual unfoldment or religious commitment can reach a consensus with each other where there's respect, and that we're all working on the same thing. And really what we're working on at this point is a new consciousness template for the human race, because the old religions are failing. And so that's what we're working on now. And that'll be achieved when the literal truths of the old material are harvested and preserved. And there are a lot of good truths in the old material, in the Abrahamic scriptures, in the Quran, the Hadith, the Bible, Catholic Bible, the Latin Bible, the Torah, the Talmud, Zohar, Kabbalah. There's stuff to be harvested there that can go forward, right? It's like stripping a car down after it's broken for the parts. You can reuse the windshield wipers, tires are 80%, Just because a car doesn't work doesn't mean it doesn't have any parts you can use. And I'll tell you now something about writing The Devil in Us. So, the first being to come to me And it came in meditation. Before I allow something into my consciousness, it has to meet me in my meditative space. I've developed this over the years, that I really, very difficult to breach me in any way, shape, or form. I mean, things can communicate with me, but the space around me is, for some reason, I don't get a lot of entities around me and stuff like that. But there were some entities I was going to have to work with to get the book done. And don't take that to mean demonology. You got to be so careful what you say, because people are going to take it the wrong way, especially if there's a lot of religious entrainment in their thinking. So the first entity to come to me, I never noticed how clown-like he was before. And I described him to Anthony in Australia. I described him to Bob. Bob met him as well, internally on the astral. He's about 9 feet tall. He wore a robe. And his face was chalk white, kind of like the Joker's when he puts the makeup on. And his lips were sort of ruby red. And I didn't equate it with a clown at the time. But the clown face comes from... That's how the Nephilim look in the spirit world. They look like demonic clowns. They look like Pennywise from It and stuff like that. And this entity that came and worked on the devil and us was very, very much one of these creatures. One of these beings. I don't want to be derogatory. Now, you know me. I don't have any problem with it. The God I worship has no enemies. Creates and loves everything, and that which falls out of God's love ceases to exist. Maybe not immediately, but will cease to exist unless it realigns itself with the love or the energy of the Creator. Because parasitism can only go so far. So yeah, they look like clowns. They look like clowns. And this is where... and so it makes you wonder, well, if they're telling me this, who's doing all this on the planet? It's not them. Okay? I can tell you that. It's not Satan and the demons that are doing what's being done to the world now. That's not their role or function. It's something else. There may be a portion of the energy, actually a significant portion of the energy that's maligning the world right now is in fact demonic. But it's demonic in bondage to human magic. It's not the demonic will serving its own divine purpose. It's the demonic will in bondage to human magic. Okay? There's stuff that gets said on this podcast that I don't know. I know you folks believe me. I talk to a lot of you offline, chat with you and stuff. And I know so many of you have had your own experiences and stuff. You know what's going on. Right? So it's a very nice group of people to speak to. We have a very nice community here. We have a satsang, which is the Sanskrit word for spiritual community. We have a satsang here. We have a spiritual collaboration. It's kind of beautiful. Yeah, a digital temple, if you will. And I like mixing spirit and matter together. I like talking about society and politics because it is a final expression of the spiritual energies. Yes, it's temporal. Yes, it's going to go away. If you want to say that anything that is impermanent is an illusion, okay. I'm not going to beat you up for using that language. It's technically incorrect because the manifestation is the temporary thing. The energy which manifested is eternal. It's not an illusion. You're having a temporary experience with a very specific purpose and goal within an eternal experience, which is the experience of yourself as a spiritual being outside of body. So the eternal having a temporary experience over and over again. Trying to command and master what the Torah Jews call the Book of Life. I've also been looking a lot at Torah Judaism lately, and it's beautiful. Torah Judaism and the Gospels go hand in hand. It's really amazing when you get into it. How all the lit up and benign prophets were saying, everything they were saying was leading to the Christ. Everything. Torah Judaism and the Gospels and Christ go together. Talmudic Judaism and Christ and the Gospels do not go together. The Zohar and Christ do not go together, and the Kabbalah and Christ do not go together. Remember that video I played, a long time ago, at the very beginning of my broadcasting cycle? Here on YouTube, I think, yeah. I played a video, and it was a Jewish guy talking about the dangers of the Kabbalah and how it just corrupts and perverts the simplest of joys and rhythms of life. This is what we're up against, folks. Okay? This is what we're up against. Now, underneath that is another layer of bullshit, which is the ego, the drama, the legacy, the self-importance of all the actors. You know? Hillary Clinton is not faithfully and dutifully serving some dark lord in defiance or in desolation of her own will and ego. She's celebrating herself. Nancy Pelosi, all of them. They have all their little dramas going. This stuff means something to them. You know, their name, their legacy, and all this sort of stuff. Psychotic people and the really dark people, they really like to invest their energy in the timeline as strongly as possible. They must know it's going to end. I mean, nothing stays down here. It stays, I guess you could say, for a certain class of people that can see it, can read the Akashic records and stuff. But you don't have to physically be here to read the Akashic records of the human race. You can be somewhere else and access them. So, I'm playing another little video, okay? This is my buddy Sean Ryan. And should I play it? Well, I mean, Sean Ryan's on. He gives permission to replay his short clips as long as you give him credit. This is Vigilance Elite, the Sean Ryan podcast. It's already aired on YouTube, and he didn't get it taken down, so I don't think it's going to get taken down. But it's about the medical stuff. Here we go.
The only thing that changed between Class 350 and 351, and this can be controversial, the mandatory COVID vaccine. It's the only variable that changed. Now, let me qualify that with, I do not want to get into the politicized debate about all the things that happened during COVID. However, what both sides of the aisle have absolutely agreed upon is that the vaccine produces fatigue, as does the virus, sometimes long fatigue. It happens. Having had the vaccine or the virus both times and the vaccine, I can tell you, yeah, it produces a lot of fatigue in me as well. So what's interesting is the mandate for the vaccine came down for Class 350, but it was the week before they started Hell Week. So we said, no, we're going to waive that. That's way too close. It's way too much risk. We don't know what's going to happen. So we let them do it after Hell Week. So 351 was the very first class that we then gave the COVID vaccine to as they started first phase right beforehand. What's interesting about that too is all the attrition data for classes 351, 352, which is where Kyle died, and 353 show that the majority of the attrition happened within the first 48 to 72 hours of those classes, which was another anomaly that was different from everything we'd seen in the past. Well, kind of makes sense when you think about the fact that these guys were just really fatigued. You gave them a shot that fatigued them and then expected them to perform in some of the most difficult training as we dropped the hammer on day one of first phase, and then we acted surprised when they all quit. I can't remember which class it was, but one of them, over 100 people quit within 72 hours. The helmets had lined the corner. We weren't even done with week one. I brought in a PhD because I was losing my mind. I'm like, I need you to help me. Like, what is going on? And he said, Brad, I'm telling you, I've looked at this stuff for 14 years. I've studied every single soft branch and selection assessment and training. When this kind of thing happens, it's usually cadre running amok. I was like, come look, please tell me. Tell me I'm taking crazy pills. He's like, I'm bringing my bias with me. Just so you know. I said, bring your bias. He walked away and said, it's not your cadre. At the time, we hadn't isolated it down to that one variable, but he had a lot of other variables he added to the mix, which were absolutely contributory as well. So it's just a false narrative that we were just ramping up training. The data shows it. It's the only variable that changed. What's interesting, too, is the attrition starts dropping off a few classes later. Well, why? Well, that would make sense as now people are entering the Navy, going to boot camp, getting their shot at boot camp, and having 12 weeks to bleed off the effects of the fatigue before they check into buds, then do the 7 weeks of prep, and then start first phase. So it makes sense the attrition would start spiking down right about the time I changed command, by the way.
Yeah. So that was the result of the medical regiment in Bud School. Highest attrition rates ever because of the effects. Very interesting. So, getting back on topic and talking about the war that we're in, it's a very interesting war, and generally in the last 100 years, when a war begins, you go, and you're deliberately, physically delivered to harm's way. You're going to be put somewhere where people 100, 200 meters away are going to be shooting at you with long rifles with iron sights or scopes. Okay? You can't avoid the danger. You're going to go into the lottery of life and death that is war. But in this particular war, it seems as though God is allowing conscientious objection. Because all of the things that can kill you now require your consent, your attraction, or your participation. They're not mandatory yet. Right? I find that very interesting. And I don't think they're going to get the street-level violence to anything near what they want. There just aren't that many psychotics around now. Even with all the people they've brought into these countries, the violence rate is really not that high. And look, I'm going to tell you something, okay? And this is from a guy who has lived every class or station of life, from the lowest, not the highest. I've never been a millionaire or a billionaire. I've hung around with them, but never been one. But the point is, I've been at the lower levels of life where people live desperate and compromised lives. And I'm going to tell you something. It's no small thing to kill a human being. If you think there's literally tens of thousands of people out there now in the United States who could gash your neck and bleed you out with a machete without thinking twice about it, you're wrong. There aren't. So all those people they've brought in, they're going to have to be provoked and cattle prodded in some way. Now, that could be fairly easily done by revoking their benefits. I'm not going to say it's a difficult thing to do, but that would be a lot of public outcry. So I don't know that they can do that. Right? I don't know that they can do that. I think this might just be the whole plan, is to just dump loads and loads of people into cities and just see what happens as a social experiment. I don't think that they have any defined outcome, though, because you can create the circumstances for the chaos, but you cannot create the chaos. Not unless they send their own people in. The real psychotics, the super soldiers, the people that can, skull fuck a baby, so to speak. And there are people like that. But those are highly trained people. They don't generally naturally occur. That's usually the product of some form of mind control training. So I wouldn't be terrified about street violence or things like that. And life's always been dangerous, so it's really no different now than it's ever been. Oh, okay. So yeah, but you're still allowed to be a conscientious objector in this war. But remember, they still have quite I think over half of the four horsemen of the apocalypse yet to unveil, and all of the manifestations of the horsemen can significantly escalate as well. Right? So what are the four horsemen? You've got disease, pestilence, famine, and war. Okay, we haven't really seen the famine yet, although food prices are going way up, and they're destroying so many bread baskets in the world now. So what I'm saying is the war is going on right now. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know how to lay words to it, which is a very difficult thing for me to admit to, because that's my talent, is laying words to things. But I just don't want to get it wrong. And at the same time, I don't want to be too amorphous I don't want to be too ambiguous in my descriptors. So, but if I were to waive those cautions and speak freely, I might say something like, this is a war perpetrated by an organizational force that is global. It seems to have conscripted most of the governments in the world. And for the most part, the war appears to be governments acting upon their own people. And it's uniform. I am quite certain the same thing is going on in China. If I were to go and live there for 6 months, I could give you an accurate report. But I'm not going to do that because I love where I live. But my Mandarin would come back in about a month. Once all the words are around me again and I'm listening to it all, my Mandarin would be back in like a month. So I think it's going on there. I know Japan's getting the shit beat out of them now. Like I said last night, I knew it was a shit show the moment they bombed. Did I say this on air last night, or was this me talking off air with someone on Skype? I think it was an off air conversation. But I knew the moment they bombed Nord Stream 2 that the war was on us. So they used the excuse of the Ukrainian war to decapitate European productivity and decapitate the engine of the European economy, which was Germany. If you didn't see that for what it was that the years ago it happened, you're just not paying attention. You should at this point be able to stitch together an entire quilt from 9/11 to now without missing a stitch. And you should be very easily be able to see that these calamities are not bad luck, that these are intentional, planted, wired, timed, and deployed explosions to deliberately collapse our society. They've been working on us for 23 years now, since 2001. Planning for decades before that. I'd say the whole century really was leading up to this now. The whole century. Amazing, since I wrote The Devil in Us, I have magnetized all information. Oh, this is another thing that consciousness does, by the way. So I'll explain another aspect of consciousness. So there's manifestation, which is the propulsion of your inner life into the outer reality. It could be something as simple as thinking about someone you haven't thought about for 2 decades. They cross through your mind, and the next day or 2 days later they call you. So that was the psychic call before the physical call. Because we're all psychic. It's just a question of sort of tuning into it. So manifestation is the unfoldment of your internal desire into your timeline. It could be as simple as getting a degree and becoming a doctor, or literally manifesting things like, being an artist, a musician. And then when you get into the high spiritual manifestation, they can literally open up their hand and say, hey, show me an acorn, and they just go like this, and they open their hand and there's an acorn in their hand. Spiritual manifestation. Some people call it a miracle, but it's just spiritual manifestation. So that's one of the aspects of consciousness, and I talk about that a lot. There's another aspect of consciousness which is equally, if not more powerful, and much more useful for the spiritual disciple. And that is the magnetization of information to you, by sending out a genuine curiosity. So when you sit down for 6 months and write something, like The Devil in Us, for months and years after a book like that is finished, data will be coming into me. I'll be magnetizing data that supports, conforms, and expands the thesis I presented beyond anything I even conceived in the initial stages of the book or realized in the writing of the book. And it just keeps coming in and coming in and coming in. I saw another one today, like something they did in the 1920s. They deliberately took all the minerals out of certain kinds of foods and stuff. And it was all like completely deliberate. What do I mean when I say deliberate? There was no commercial reason. It wasn't greed. When people think about this stuff, one of the errors they make is they attribute it to human frailty. one of the 7 deadly sins: greed, lust, vanity, wrath, gluttony, pride, and whatever the last one is, jealousy. And it becomes a religious thing in a kind of limited psychological way. We know that individual human beings can get addicted to power. We've seen the Saddam Husseins. We've seen these people. We know they exist. We believe it when we're told that the North Koreans don't believe Kim Jong-un poops. Seriously, I mean that literally, right? So we know this kind of crazy exists. Everybody accepts it. And a lot of times when people begin to engage the state of the world, they'll try to outthink their soul. You see, the soul doesn't think, it just perceives and it knows. But the clever people who have too much mental activity, they go out and they do this whole projection thing and they paint atop the data. They didn't intentionally take the nutritional minerals out of food, Bruce. They did it as a byproduct of this chemical process to save 82% of the production cost of this kind of grain-based cereal. No. They fucking did it intentionally to deliberately weaken our immune systems and to make us stupider. And how do I know that? Because it repeats like 200 times in 100 years. All these little corporate decisions, going right back to whether we go with the AC/DC metered system of Edison or the free energy system of Tesla. Everywhere we go, from the naturopathic and plant-based medicines, in which they knew all the powers of cannabis in the 19th century, the 1800s. They knew it. When you went to a pharmacy back then, there would be a big cannabis leaf on the banner of the building. That's how you knew it was a pharmacy. For pain killing, for depression, cannabis was, they did the tinctures, they did the extracts, all the stuff that's coming back now. What replaced it? Well, the Rockefellers replaced it with a petroleum-based medical system, and through their political power, got all this other form of medicine outlawed. It's the same thing. But even that, you can say, well, that, Bruce, again, that's just greed. No, it isn't. It's a deliberate compromise of our health and a deliberate commercialization of the medical system, no doubt. There is an element, there's a material benefit for them as they do their satanic service of attempting to, the pseudo-satanic service, because they're not worshiping Satan. But as they do this service to destroy, debilitate, weaken, and ultimately capture the human race. See, they want to do both. The primary mission is what I just described. The ancillary benefit is the cheddar. So they kind of go hand in hand. But you gotta have a kind of special eye to see the spiritual nature of all this. You have to be opened up to those energies. You have to be able to track those energies. You have to know what its scat looks like. You have to know what its footprints in the snow look like, metaphorically. But once you know it, you can track it, and you just see it all the time. I would hope that those of you who listen to and watch the Talamanca Review are beginning to develop, if you had not had it before the Talamanca Review, that you are beginning to develop these sort of instincts for spiritually seeing reality, as opposed to mentally or conceptually or ideologically seeing it. See the energies. Okay? From an energetic perspective, yeah, it's demonic, but it's demonic in bondage. Okay? So I suppose the person who could liberate the demons from the magical bondage of humans would be the hero of our day. Because once that oppressive force is gone, there won't be too much left to compete with. And that's the bulk of their leverage right now. It's the bulk of it. I sometimes wonder what people would think just randomly tuning into this show. Never seen it before. They tune in like a minute past what I was, and just listen to the last minute of what I'd said. I think it's like a digital One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I want to watch the baseball game. I want to watch the baseball game. Well, anybody wants to call in and talk about what we talked about, what I talked about tonight, got one more thing to talk. I was gathering some material for tonight's show, and I thought, Bruce, the stuff you're covering, it's kind of dark and stuff. What do you got for people to make them feel good? I got this, Hope Monkey. Huh? Hope Monkey. You believe that? I cried when I saw that this afternoon. I couldn't believe that, man. So beautiful. The dude hears the cat crying. Says, I'm going to get that cat out of that jam. Can you imagine if human beings lived up to their heart's potential? And we weren't all boxed in this tension grid of making money and everything? And that's why they're going after the money, everything now. Fucking dogs. You'll own nothing and never have been happier. Man, they're going after Trump big time. They just do not want that guy coming in. Anybody's got anything to say, now is the time to say it. 864-810-1039 or seen that Tinker1 on Skype. Otherwise, me and Hope Monkey are going to go watch some Netflix. Maybe do some Kung Fu. I don't know. But I was supposed to get my saunas in today. I got these saunas. You can kind of build a sauna. You need a welder and a bunch of stuff. But I contracted it out to a buddy of mine down in town. He's doing all the welding. But you take an old propane tank, like a cooking tank, and you cut the top off, and there's a bunch of modifications you do to it, and then you turn it upside down, and you put it back in as the bowl, and then you cut a door in it, you put a handle and some hinges on it, and then you got to build a chimney on the side, and then there's this little bass that gets welded onto the top, and you put about 6 inches of sauna stone in there, which is just stone that won't explode under fire. So you test your sauna stones by gathering stones, building a fire, and throwing all the stones in the fire and get the fire going for like 2 hours, super hot, red coals. And the stones that don't explode are suitable for a sauna. It's that simple. And then so I got a couple of these things coming up. And I have a sauna up here. It hasn't been in use yet, but I am really looking forward to it. Can you imagine, middle of the rainforest? And I can go and take like 125 degree sauna. And I'm building a shower right beside it. So you sauna for 10 minutes, take a cold shower. Sauna for 10 minutes, take a cold shower. All under a blanket of stars in the most biodiverse 1,000 square kilometers on the planet. By the way, I'm opening the place up. It'll be open by probably October. If anybody wants to come and visit me, anybody who listens to me, send me an email. You can come and stay. Just pay for your groceries. And help me feel out the business. And we'll go visit the reserve. You can spend 3 days with me. I realize that's a lot to ask of people now, hey, buy a plane ticket, get a passport, buy a plane ticket, and come and visit me. But you can if you want. And you see how I live. And I think most of you that listen to me, I'd like to meet. So you're more than welcome to come over and have a sauna. I'm gonna have 2 saunas actually. I got another one built for my main bathroom, which is a cold water wash room. So it's just a big tub full of water, and you use plastic buckets, and you just wet yourself. You foam up with a sponge, and then you rinse yourself, and you wash your hair and everything. But it's all like room temperature water. So I put a sauna in there, get that up to like 130 degrees Fahrenheit, and same thing. It's like a sauna you shower in, or a steam room. Yeah, and I'm getting a big wood balcony built all around my pool, and an extension on my back concrete patio. It's really, really coming together, man. And then, yeah, I'll probably get the whole thing done, and there'll be no tourism in the world. But yeah. So that's about all I got to say today. Let me see if there's anything more in my mind. Yeah, it just fascinates me how the whole socio-political thing, and how naked it all is now. How it's just like, I've never seen anything. You got to understand, folks, in the time, I was born in 1966. Watergate happened in 1972, and they literally were still talking about it right up around 1990. Like, it was, Charles Manson happened in 1969. We're still talking about him. Right? It's very interesting, right? The way the public mind works. We're still talking about Charles Manson. In fact, one of the best books ever written about Manson just came out a couple years ago. Chaos, the Charles Manson story by, I think, Robert O'Neill. It's O'Neill anyways. If it's not Robert, the last name is O'Neill. It just gives you an indication of the public consciousness back then, that people would talk about Watergate for 15 or 20 years, right? And you go back and you watch those All in the Family episodes in the mid-late 70s. Rob Reiner, Meathead, and Carol O'Connor, Archie Bunker, every other show they're arguing about Nixon. And the show is in like 1977, 1978. This is like 6-7 years after Nixon. Look at the public consciousness now in terms of the flow of information. It's just, we've been overwhelmed. And when you get overwhelmed, you go into a kind of cognitive shock. It's not a PTSD. It's not a post-traumatic shock like a car accident or something like that, but it is a type of shock. It's like a cognitive aberration. You just reach the limit of negativity. You say, I can't take anymore. Oh, mass shooting, oh this, oh that, oh that. And then what happens is you get desensitized, and that's where they want you. They want you. By the way, this is the MK Ultra program. We're going through trauma-based conditioning right now. So what they used to do, and you go back and you watch the Jason Bourne movies, the ones where they're training him and dunking his head in water and making him shoot someone in the head and everything. That's the MK Ultra program. They show you a little bit of it right in the Jason Bourne movies. But at the same time, realize that we're going through mass MK Ultra right now in Western societies. This is a controlled and deployed psychological operation. Okay? A controlled and deployed psychological operation to create cognitive dissonance and a kind of a shock in human beings, especially in the West. When I look at these protests now, when I look at what's going on in England and stuff, and I look at the pro-Palestinian Arabs in London, I say, well, that's how you express your distaste for them killing your people. How do we do that now as white people? Our people are being killed now, and we're all pretending it doesn't even happen. You do that any other place in the world, Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, they go crazy. They throw their governments out, and yet we continue in the pretense that we're the freest societies in the world. Why don't we act like free people? Why are we so easily controlled? Is it the curse of material prosperity, which is going away now too for the Westerners? But is it the curse of material prosperity? Is that all it is? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. There's something else going on here. I remember I said this a few times on air, but I'll repeat it. The last words John Edmonds ever said to me, it was in a text message on Facebook Messenger. He was dead a couple days later. But the last thing he wrote to me, he said, Bruce, I live in a place where the Spanish-speaking people are willing to do anything to survive. And the English-speaking people around me do not know, have no idea the level of danger around them, nor would they believe it if you told them. How can there be such a cognitive disparity? How is it that this ability to cope with the reality of the world what has infected Western culture? How did we get this way? Right? Are we just getting ready to transmute out of this world? Yeah. Wow. Well, I think that'll be about it for tonight. I can't think of anything else to talk about. How about that hope monkey? Remember that monkey the next time you're feeling down. All right, I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been